We are back. We are not live for you, but live for us.
Live for us.
And it's December.
It's happening.
That's
the
right.
First.
The first Nerd Out of December 2025. Welcome. My name is Lyle.
I am Jack.
We're here to talk about the sermon. I was going to say weak is the new strong, but my understanding is Netflix sent a cease and desist that it was infringing on their copyright of...
Was it really?
Orange is the New. So their lawyers spoke to our lawyers.
Yeah. We just dropped the
so
new.
it's just
Weak is strong.
Is strong.
Yep.
Weak. We'll still call it weak is the new strong. Just kidding. Weak is strong. That's how you'll find it on YouTube. Of course, that's always linked in the description below. If you missed the sermon, you want to catch that up. But
that was a good segue.
There we go. Weak is strong. That's what we're here to talk about today. And obviously, it's still chilly outside, so it's still
It is hoodies.
long sleeve hoodie weather.
It's nice. I love
Jacket
it.
weather.
Finally,
Yes, your dreams have come true.
my dreams have come true.
So we'll jump right into takeaways. We're wasting no time this week.
Nope. Off and going.
Can't see my phone if I keep it behind the stand. These things should be obvious to me. All right, key takeaways for week is strong. Really, the overall takeaway I thought was a good one. That biblical hope, it's not wishful thinking. It's anchored in God's faithful character. In our weakest moments, God's strength is most clearly displayed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, if we were to sum it up in a sentence, here's kind of the main points, though, the takeaways there. Number one, biblical hope is anchored hope, not wishful thinking, but confidence in God's faithful character. Number two, weak is the new strong. Our weaknesses create space for God's power to show up. The third takeaway, God's grace is sufficient. It's enough for this moment, right now. It's a present tense reality. The fourth takeaway, pain points are not our identity. What happened to us or what we struggle with does not define us. Christ does. And finally, number five, God's no can be protection, not rejection. Sometimes what we're praying for isn't what we need.
Yeah. Yep.
So, key takeaways there. Diving right in with questions here. You really talked a lot. The foam finger made it. Also, props. Congrats. You made it to Pastors with Props.
What?
You made it to the Instagram account, Pastors with Props.
Is that a real thing?
It's a real thing. I sent it to you. I don't know that. So I got home from church last night.
I am stunned.
I've joked about this with some people for a little bit because Jack is definitely a prop guy. In case you didn't notice. So he started
if I can find
with the
a
same
prop to make something stick in someone's mind.
There was even a period within the last year and a half that I remember you were like, I think I was going to use a prop. I'm like, you can't. You've used 2 props in the last 3 weeks. That'll be 3 and 4. Like, so ever since Pastors with Props
to my youth ministry days
has shown up, I was like, man, Jack's going to make this one day. And then last night, on his last night at church, Sam Crandall took a picture of you with your foam finger.
I did see that.
Tagged Pastors with Props, and you made it.
I made it. Gosh. I'd like to thank all the little people.
That's right. It's not Preachers with Sneakers, but it is Pastors with Props.
I had good sneakers on too, but anyway, I'll take the props.
That's right.
Well, I feel honored.
That's right. It's worth, it made me laugh. Also send it to your daughter because I feel like she's seen it.
She would appreciate that.
Definitely sent it to you two last night and then showed on you. We laughed.
That's
all right,
so funny.
Get into it. So you start out with the foam finger talking about how we celebrate success. Like we talked about what our life is pointing to. So really the first couple questions.
Yeah.
Centering around that. But
the rightly aimed life back to week 1, just to tie back.
Exactly. Yeah. So how does Paul's message, though, that weak is the new strong, how does that challenge our cultural norms? And what would it look like for us to start to embrace this idea that weak is the new strong in a culture that celebrates strength as success and self-sufficiency?
Yeah, I mean, so much of our life and living is wrapped up around remaining strong or gaining strength, or whether that's working out physically or whether that's working out to get my bank account to a certain number so that I'm strong against whatever, or in a host of ways. Emotionally, I'm going to stay strong, so I'm not going to let my guard down. And the reality is what Paul, I think, discovered, or was probably more appropriate, was discovering, because you never fully arrive. was that weak is the new strong. That in my weaknesses, if I can acknowledge them, and I can recognize that they create space and room for God's power to be active, and His power is stronger than mine or what I can muster up. And if I rely on Him and His strength to get me through, then actually is what brings the intimacy with Him. That's what he writes about in Philippians chapter 3, that I want to know the power of Christ, yes, but it's also the fellowship of His sufferings. And there's an intimacy that comes with that in our weaknesses. I didn't share this story last night because one of the persons was in the room, but I don't know if they watched this, and so. But I remember walking down the hallway when we got the phone call that my father-in-law passed, and I was having the conversation in my head with God of like, why him first and why him now? Because I really thought he would pull through and maybe have a couple more years type thing. And just it would exasperate the reality of what we'd have to deal with and what Lisa, my mother-in-law, would have to deal with. And I remember the long hallway at UMC, and that was the verse that the Spirit of God was just whispering, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness." And it was a tearful, long, I mean, that hallway is, 400 yards. And it was a long walk and a long conversation with God in that 400 yards. And that's what he kept whispering. And there's been another moment recently where 3:30 in the morning, searching for someone that I love, and God's whispering that verse again. And so it's raw and real in those weaknesses, in those difficult moments that don't have explanation or they're not going to be resolved. And it's the whispers of God that says, my grace is sufficient. Like my power is enough for this moment. You're not alone in this moment. Even though you may, at the core of who you are, you want it changed. And so we pray for it to change. That's what Paul talks about. I pleaded with God 3 times to remove this. And God says no. And sometimes this no is for our protection. And Paul alludes to that it's the protection from pride and how things would have, or maybe potentially played out for Paul, because he has this incredible revelation.
Which we assume, by the way, Paul's referring to himself.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. We do make that assumption.
The whole time, and it's just like, I'm going to boast and all this other stuff. And then suddenly he kind of shifts gears randomly of like, I even know a person who... And so a lot of people believe it was Paul who had the vision, that he just was trying to remain a little bit humble after having said vision.
I've been in heaven.
Especially when it comes to having a wooden tent pole of a thorn in his side.
Yeah.
He was just like, okay, maybe I can't brag about this too much. So that's why it's someone he knows. Just speaking for a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Which we all do. Those kind of thing. The air quotes. So he's dealt with a lot. I mean, if you go back and just read chapter 11 and you think about everything he endured, I didn't realize the beaten with the Roman rods was literally to break your vertebrae.
Yeah, I never heard that.
And basically to make you, whether invalid or bent over, you would probably be bent over like a hunchback for the rest of your life. And he endured that,
3 times?
3 times. And so that's why there's all this speculation about, okay, what was his thorn? Was it epilepsy? Was it this deformity? Was it his eyesight being severely bad?
Could have been all of it.
Yeah, it could have been the whole kit and caboodle of that. Yeah. And so that's when he talks about this thorn. That is the difference. It's not a splinter. It's this, like something severe that was a major problem or struggle point for him, pain point for him. And I think maybe that's, we alluded to it in one of the takeaways, but I think we all have pain in life and we have struggles. And it's easy. What's fascinating to me this is the only place in the 13 letters that Paul writes that God uses Paul to write 13 chapters of the 26, 27 New Testament books.
13 books, yeah.
Um,
27.
It's the only place he mentions this. Like, I find that fascinating because if I were to write about my story, so many of us, we talk about our pain. And again, it's not wrong to talk about your pain. It's not wrong to talk about the struggles and the difficulties and the circumstances you've had to endure, you're enduring. But it's like Paul understood, it's not my identity. And I think that's where sometimes I think I mentioned this last night, in our therapeutic type culture, we almost wear our pain as a badge, and it becomes our identity. I was mistreated as a child, or I had someone walk out on me. And so, yes, that's horrible. And I wish that hadn't happened, but it doesn't have to define you. And I think that's sometimes where we get a little skewed. And so I just find it fascinating that Paul talks about it here.
Yeah.
But
you would especially think in 2 Timothy,
yeah,
as he's nearing the end.
Yes.
It's a personal letter that even with
Not
his
one
protege, he could have just been, the pains of this, and it's been tough.
Could have been a lot of lamenting.
But been managing it, been getting through. Like, he could have talked about it.
Right.
But that's not.
He didn't.
It's not there.
No. And so, again, he acknowledges it, and we can acknowledge the reality of our pain, but we also acknowledge the reality of God's grace and his power, which is greater than our pain. And that's the point. Weak is the new strong.
Absolutely. So since you kind of jumped to that, had a question about that too. So you talked about being able to admit the reality of our pain without making it our identity, especially in a culture where maybe that's the interesting thing is our culture does celebrate strength, and yet now we're starting to see our culture celebrates not even our weakness. They celebrate trauma. Like, we use our trauma as a way to earn a seat at the table, to have a voice. But what's the difference between acknowledging our pain then and making it our identity? And why is that distinction so important for us?
I think acknowledging our pain is, maybe this is where my dad's generation didn't do well. And I think maybe that's the counter shift that we're beginning to see is in the older generation, it was, okay, just, shut up and keep going. And you don't talk about your pain.
About greatest generation.
Right. The greatest generation ever.
The kids of the boomers
broke
as well.
on it. Yeah.
Kind of learn from that.
And so you just, and listen, they fought through world wars and so yes, there was a lot to deal with that our generation has not dealt with. But so the importance of acknowledging the reality of our pain, that gives clarity and it gives a voice to here's the heartache. And I think that's what you see even in the book of Job. I mentioned his story last night, that so much heartache that plays out in his story, and he's able to acknowledge it. But at the same time, toward the end of his story, there's this realization that, gosh, even in the midst of everything he's endured, there's a realization of how small he is in comparison to the reality of what God's created and to the reality of God himself. Yeah. And so I think when we acknowledge our pain, we can be truthful. We can be honest with ourselves. We can learn from it. We can get therapy. We can heal from it. We can move forward. But if we continually camp on our pain and we wear it as a badge and it becomes our identity, we're actually making it bigger than maybe it really is, in a sense of, it's not that
certainly bigger than it was ever meant to be.
Correct. And it begins to re-traumatize over and over repeatedly, instead of being able to get to a place where God's power can pour in and begin to heal us from that. And so that's, I think, the difference between acknowledging it and wearing it as an identity.
Yeah.
That God's grace is the ultimate identity that's been given to me. Timothy Keller talks about that we have the only faith where our identity has been gifted to us.
Right. And that's an important distinction, I think, for all of us to make of recognizing what has happened to us doesn't have to define us.
Mm-hmm.
In a day and age where PTSD is a real thing, and we know that there are people who struggle with that.
Yep.
We've got to also talk about the fact that there are others who have post-traumatic growth, that it is possible that going through trauma can help a person reorder their life and give them a focus, and give them a greater purpose, which is what we talked about.
It could be
What
a
is my life pointing
reorienting kind of moment.
Yeah.
That, like I mentioned, Nick Vujicic's life. If you don't, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but I heard
Probably
that guy.
not. You're not.
Probably not.
You're not known for
getting
handling those
pronunciation
European
right.
last names well.
It's Vuijuiz, something like that.
I think it's like Vujicic, but
It might be.
yeah.
I trust you more than me. But think about his life: no arms, no legs.
Yeah.
And this guy travels around the world sharing about God's grace and hope. He's, not just a motivational speaker, but like he's Tim Tebow on steroids, but without the muscles. Of the reality of what God can do with a guy that if you just look at, you go, there's no way. And yet God's power begins to make a way. And that's the point, I think, of what Paul's getting to, is that God's power creates within the space of our weakness the ability to reorient ourselves and the ability to do something in us and through us that's productive and healthy and helpful.
Yeah. And it also makes me think of Steve Cuss. We love to quote our friend Steve Cuss.
Yeah.
I say our friend. It's really
our friend.
Someone that we just value. And he talks about we name things to tame things. When you name something out loud, it kind of tames the power that it has. They talk about that even in cognitive behavioral therapy, where if you have negative thoughts, sometimes just speaking those thoughts out loud takes away kind of the
zing,
the hoodoo that it kind of holds over us, and it's just how it can grip us. So I think there's kind of taking it with this, like Paul talks about, okay, so his grace is sufficient for me, because his power is made perfect in weakness. He's like, therefore, I'm going to boast all the more in weaknesses and hardships and insults and persecution and difficulties and all of these things. Like he wants Christ's power to rest on him all the more. So we hear that, and then we talk about, we want to at least acknowledge our pain. So what does it look like for us to embrace our weaknesses rather than trying to hide our weaknesses, in order to use that as an opportunity for God's glory to shine in our lives?
It's a great question that we both can answer, because I think that's a deep question.
Right.
What does it look like to embrace your weaknesses?
We're nerding out, folks. We're doing it.
We're doing it. We're going there. I think it's honest evaluation, and not... So again, Steve Cuss talking about right-sizing ourselves, in the sense of it's an honest evaluation of like, here's where my struggle points are, here's where my weaknesses are, here's where my challenges in life. So I can acknowledge the pain, I can acknowledge the challenge, but I can also acknowledge my failures, or I can acknowledge my weaknesses, that I'm not as gifted in this area as someone else is, or as you are, or whatever, and I don't have to be. I don't want my weaknesses to be a glaring fault that is fixable, because some of us have glaring faults that are fixable. Like I've heard people say, "Well, I'm an angry person, and that's my weakness." And well, why are you angry? Well, maybe that goes back to some childhood stuff. Maybe that goes back to some hurts. Usually angry people are hurt people who never have dealt with their hurt. And so you can get help and healing from that. And that doesn't have to define you, or it doesn't have to be your norm, your default. So sometimes our weaknesses are things that are fixable. But I will never be able to dunk a basketball, though I wish I could. And I hope in heaven that I've got like a 60-inch vertical jump and I can do it, maybe. But that is a weakness of mine at 5'6", that I'm just not going to be able to on a 7-foot rim, I could do it. But on a normal rim, ain't going to happen. So silly illustration. But the reality is there's weaknesses in me that I'm just not going to have the ability. I marvel at the way that you can play instrument. I played saxophone growing up, but I always wanted to play guitar. Man, now I could work at it, and I could probably take it up here in my 50s and try, but I'll never be as gifted as you are in that, and that's okay. And that doesn't make it a weakness per se. It just means it's not my wheelhouse, not my gifting, and that's okay. So part of this is acknowledging what maybe other people are more gifted at and letting them shine, and helping people become the best at what they can be, and you becoming the best at what you could be. And so I don't know if that kind of hit at that, but you have other thoughts that you have?
Yeah, it was just, so it's interesting because I was also going to bring up that we both received an email last night, of just how it was difficult for, the person basically said it's just difficult to understand what Paul is talking about because there is so much hurt, there's so much brokenness in this world.
Yeah.
So it's like we can look at the hurt and the brokenness, and it is difficult to make sense of.
And it feels overwhelming.
Because I think in our theology, we know we talk about God's sovereignty, but it's really easy to overlook the fact that God has not diminished his sovereignty by doing this, but he has still chosen to allow Satan to have authority in this world. So there is a deep theological tension. Going back to Job, that God allows some awful things sometimes to happen.
That God doesn't cause it, but he allows it. And
doesn't stop it.
That's the part that you go, well, why was my kid, kidnapped? Or why was my,
why did we lose this baby?
How did we lose this baby? Why was that rape allowed to happen? Like a host of heartache and treacherous
horrendous things.
Yeah,
horrendous things. So I think it's easy to want to celebrate the successes of strength, especially when it comes to vindication of evil.
Yes. We cheer for that.
And we should. Like we should. So like it's hard to transfer though. Like maybe sometimes we want to transfer that into other areas of life, when the reality is like my weaknesses are not an injustice. And
that's a good way.
There are some who there's a way that we can wear it in our identity, that if I really wanted to be a musician, but guitar just never came naturally to me because my identity was wrapped up in, I want to be that worship leader guy. I want to be on stage doing this. Is that even pure motives? Like, are the motivations right for something like that?
Valid.
So like, we feel it's an injustice to not be able to, we just don't get this thing. And it's not an injustice just because you have weaknesses. It's just not who you need to be. Like God has gifted every one of us in some way, shape, or form. So just understanding our weaknesses, I think, and embracing the weaknesses as being a place where God's power is able to shine, is understanding there are moments where my willpower is going to be running low. And because of that, I need to have the right guardrails in my life to make sure that I make the best decisions to protect myself and my own character, my own integrity, and my marriage, and like
my relationships,
all of that. Yes. So it's understanding what's most important. And when I place the primary things as what's important, which is living for God's glory, when that becomes my primary motivation, when I see the beauty and the brilliance of God's glory and I want to live for that, suddenly I can submit my weaknesses to that, and I can embrace those weaknesses because that's where God's glory shines through. I mean, my mom would never have believed that I would be up on a stage preaching, looking at me at the age of 3 or 4, that I was so shy and so scared to engage with new people, and I would hide behind my parents' legs and just, I'd be the kid you just see peeking out. And it's just like, to see you up on stage and like leading worship and preaching, like that's God. That's his power working through you. So we can
That's-
embrace those things because we
that's-
use those things for God's glory.
That was my story too, of just incredible insecurity and shyness that never wanted to be up in front or have attention. Like,
Right.
so the fact that we do what we do is a testimony to God's power at work. It's not,
And it's not like his power was at work and just like overnight.
right. Yeah.
It's not like you were 27 and
Nope.
then all of a sudden.
Nope. The light bulb goes on and ta-da.
No, it was
slow and steady
a
progress.
process over decades.
Yep.
Where God used experiences and situations to shape and mold and build,
To stretch.
to build his strength and his
Mhm.
let his power be seen in us. So
Yeah.
maybe that's it. Like maybe embracing your weaknesses is understanding that God doesn't always, with the snap of his finger, fix it.
Right.
But over the course of a faithful life, pointed
Mhm.
in the right direction, we start to see that play
Yeah.
out.
And recognizing that those stretching moments as they come or as they arrive or the opportunities there, and it is that moment maybe God's putting in front of you to stretch to serve someone outside of your comfort zone or to attempt something that maybe you're not totally comfortable with. As you do that, and God pours in some extra power for you to be able to get through it, even if you fumble it along the way, there's something about that just God continues to refine, and that's part of that development over time.
Yeah.
It strengthens you, and again, that's a good point. It's not instantaneous and gloriful. I mean, or gloriful. Glory
fun
and,
word.
and gloriful.
Gloriful.
Look it up. I made it up. Copyright. It's not going to be all glory and fulfilled
Right.
instantaneously, but
But think of how that even applies to the church for us. Like, do we want to be a church where we just, everything we did, we were able to do in our own power? We never had to rely on God to do
nope.
God-sized things, to make miraculous things happen.
Right. And it's interesting too when you think about Paul's story. I think Roger talked about this, and as I was reading back through some old notes prepping for this sermon, he talked about don't get caught window shopping. Enjoy your own inventory. In the sense that, Paul could have been like, well, how come Timothy doesn't have these issues? Or how come, Peter doesn't have these issues? And how come I'm the only one that's got, and it's easy to go window shopping at other people's either gifts and talents or their lack of weaknesses in comparison to what you've had to deal with or what your circumstances have played out and the cards that have been dealt you. And you're like, well, how come blah, blah, blah. And I think it's just Paul coming to the realization, hey, here's my inventory. Here's the reality of my life.
Right.
And you know what? I'm going to let God's power be active in the midst of my story and not wish for someone else's story.
Right.
And that's where, okay, God, would you perfect me in the midst of my story and help me to own my story? And how God is an incredible recycler of stories, that the pains that you endure and the challenges that you endure. It's amazing to me over the years, 30 plus in ministry, of how God has used my weaknesses, my struggles, my tension points in life, my pain points, to then recycle that to turn around and help someone else who's going through a similar scenario. And talking with a single mom a couple weeks ago, and her feeling like, man, I feel like God's calling me into ministry of some sort, and I'm not even sure what that is. And we just start talking about, well, what would it look like to begin to help other people who have been in similar shoes? And her eyes light up, and it's like, yeah, I want to do that. And that's because God loves to recycle. That's Corinthians, where Paul writes, God comforts us in our struggles so that we can turn and comfort others with the same comfort we've been given.
Going right back to the beginning again.
What? 2 Corinthians chapter 1.
That's right. Well, even last night, as you were referencing some of that, it just reminded me of the Tozer quote, which often gets misquoted, where the actual quote of what he says, it is doubtful whether God can bless a man greatly until he has hurt him deeply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But often, it gets kind of paraphrased into God doesn't use a man greatly until he has wounded him
deeply. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just something that when we identify with the sufferings of Christ, it also helps us identify with the power of his resurrection, which is the completion of Philippians 3:10. And so when we go through the sufferings and we see life on the other side of those sufferings, that's where the power is. That's where we see the power lying.
I think it also builds a compassionate heart within us.
Which is so necessary.
If we're honest.
Why do we have so many leaders who lack that?
It's the most described emotion of Jesus in the gospel accounts. You read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the most described emotion of Jesus is compassion. Right. And yet, in the age of the platforms, in the age of social media and other things, we have many, many leader examples who lack compassion. And yet it is in the midst of our weaknesses and our struggles and our pain points where God can develop our empathy and compassion, that we will reflect the heart of Jesus a little bit more. So may that be true of you, and may that be true of me, that as we go through these hardships, it's actually developing us to have a more compassionate heart like Christ, so that we're able to respond to the needs of people and the opportunities to meet people in their weaknesses and to try to help them as we all pull each other up to say, hey, this is who we are going to be. So that group identity.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. You made a big point of God's grace, and then you had, in the Bible, just kind of underline or circle that word, box it. But when we look at the sentence, my grace is sufficient. So it's a present tense reality. So what does that mean for us practically? Like whatever struggle we might be facing right now today, what does it mean to recognize God's grace is sufficient right now?
I think it's learning to pause and to re-anchor ourselves to the moment that, God, your grace is enough for this moment. And I can pause right there in the present and go, okay, God's grace has been enough for the past. And I can think what I'm facing out in the future is overwhelming. And I don't want to get stuck there because there hasn't happened yet. I'm in the here. And the past, I've seen his faithfulness. Okay. So now I can rest in the reality that, you know, his faithfulness is going to be in this moment. His grace is going to be enough for this moment. And that's the other beauty. It's sufficient. It's enough. It's not partly enough. It's got like 3/4 of the way. When you make any kind of bread or any kind of delicious barbecue, when you know there's measurements that have to come. You don't put like half a cup of butter when it calls for a full cup of butter. No, you put the full cup of butter because you want buttery goodness. So
I know
it's
too many people who they're happy to put the half a cup of butter.
But they are missing out.
Yes.
You are missing out. Let the butter be sufficient. Let it be enough. And so it's this idea of enough, that it's a present tense reality.
Which is fine because the picture I had in the kitchen is there's those times where it's like, oh, I need to measure out milk or whatever. And you grab the carton and you're like, oh man, do we have enough? And it's just like you pour and there's like, there's enough. And you're like, oh, good. Like I don't. Like,
I got enough.
As if opening another carton,
it's too
maybe
difficult.
You're out. But if you had the other carton, yeah. It's
Unless
just
you don't have another carton.
Sweet, I don't have to open this. Like, I think that's it. Like sometimes we look at God's grace and I think that's the picture I get in my mind of like, sometimes we're shaking the carton on God's grace and like, I don't know if this is enough.
Yeah.
And then once we start to see it pour out, we realize, oh, there's enough.
It's like the story of the little kid who's playing at the ocean with all the sand toys, and he gets his bucket and he runs out and gets a big bucket full of water, comes back and makes the sand castles, and he runs back and gets more. And then he runs to his dad and says, I got to stop taking all the water out of the ocean. And the dad just, smirks, obviously, because we look at the ocean and go, yeah, there's no chance that you're going to empty the ocean of that. And I think that's the picture we have of God's grace is enough. It's sufficient. You're never going to empty it of that. And so in our current struggle, or pain point or struggling circumstance that you might be navigating. It's learning to pause to go, okay, God, you've got enough for this moment. You had enough for the past, and you got me through that. And you know what? Whatever's out in the future, you got enough for that too.
Yeah.
But I'm going to live here in this moment. I'm going to be where my feet are planted, and I'm going to trust and relax in the fact that you have enough for this moment too.
Yeah. Did you have anything else? I know you kind of were reviewing beforehand some things you might have cut for time.
I think recognizing that tension of what God allows to happen, which we briefly talked about, and that is a challenge of, okay, why do bad things happen to good people? Or the truth is, what bad things happen to bad people, and bad things play out, and we wish God would have fixed that or solved that or stopped that, whether that's genocide or me failing a test in second grade, and this gamut of things in between. Why was that allowed? And that's a difficult question and I don't know if there is an answer to that question, or this side of heaven that will know the answer, or will be able to check the box and go, oh, that's why. I don't have an easy answer for that for you. And if something in your past has played out where someone else made a choice and decision that affected you or impacted you greatly, gosh, I'm so sorry that played out that way. I wish that wasn't the case. And in that moment that God allowed, he was also still present. And maybe that makes it worse in your mind, or maybe that can actually make it better, because he didn't leave, he didn't abandon, he didn't turn his back. And he's there now to try to help heal and help and repair and restore you, and can bring some healing. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is recognizing that, okay, God's grace is now sufficient to backfill some of the struggle and pain points that we got through. And again, I think it's just a reminder to go back through. Often I'll read back through chapter 11 of just everything Paul endured, especially when I'm enduring something difficult, and I go, yeah, you know what? I've never been beat 5 times, 39 whips, a cat of 9 tails, and had the flesh ripped off my body. Never been beat by Roman rods. I've never been shipwrecked. I've gone hungry when I was fasting, but I've never gone without a meal for days on end because I didn't have it. So I haven't endured like some of the brothers and sisters that are followers of Jesus have endured around the world, and friends and that maybe I don't know, but I know we're enduring things in Ukraine that I have no clue what that would be like, or in Rwanda. And so it's recognizing, getting right perspective sometimes. Again, when we make our injustices or our weaknesses or our difficulties, they're real, and you're allowed to admit that they're real. We can name it to tame it, but maybe they're not as really big as what other people have had to endure. And that's right sizing.
Yeah. Well, just kind of wrapping up, I thought there were some good practical applications this week. So a couple things that, like you talked about, just the beginning of the series, at the end of the series, what is my life pointing to? Mm-hmm. So going into 2026, take some time to process that and ask the questions from others. Get your bank account statements and look through how you're spending your money. Look at your calendar and how you're spending your time. But journal about that. Write some thoughts down of, if you're being honest, what is your life pointing to? And just from that, ask God to reorient your focus and make sure that maybe for 2026 that focus is making him the number one priority and living for his glory. Yeah. As you go through that too, you might come across some of the weaknesses. We talked about understanding our areas of weakness, like where does your willpower run short? Do you get
Mhm.
hangry? Why? Like, what are the circumstances that lead to that? And if you know that there's some consistencies in that, how can you maybe set like a phone reminder to pop up that just says, "My grace is sufficient for you," in
Yeah.
the midst of those moments where maybe you typically feel weak or where you feel stressed. And then when that reminder goes off, use that time to pause and pray, just to reorient your focus to Him in that moment of the day. Yeah. So those were two pretty, I thought,
Yeah.
good
Very
things,
practical and helpful.
that might take some time to think through those things and apply it to your life. But that's really the goal of all of this. How can we have conversation here, ask questions that, as you think through it, just kind of helps equip you or challenges you to think a little more deeply on how you can take this to heart and live this out. So
Yep.
hopefully it's a blessing to you. Any
Yeah.
final thoughts for us?
No,
as
I
we
hope the
wrap
journey
it up?
through 2 Corinthians has been, what'd you say at the beginning? We Tarantino'd this. We started with the second one.
Yeah.
We'll hit 1 Corinthians at some point, 26 or 27 or 28, somewhere in there. But I hope the journey through 2 Corinthians has been helpful and enlightening and encouraging to your faith. And that our hope, again, like with the Nerd Outs, is that this is a tool for digital discipleship to continue to help you grow into your next step of faith. And so you've got a next step, find it, take it, and take it with Jesus.
It's great. Love it. Thanks for joining us. And we'll be back through most of December. So we'll do some Christmas editions of the Nerd Out. Yeah. And
We should wear
we'll probably pause towards the end of the year.
things. I don't know what that would be. A vest, a hat.
We'll just wear red and green. How about
Okay.
that? Maybe a holiday sweater.
We're going to journey through the wise men
That's right.
and the gifts that they brought Jesus, and why that's significant.
So join us for that. That'll be
Teaser.
kicking off this Sunday as we continue Advent, moving toward Christmas. But be blessed. Have a great week.